Federal agents who've now converged on Minneapolis.
Police in Colorado announce a record-breaking fentanyl.
Pills laced with fentanyl.
On a frozen March morning, 47 federal agents moved into position across South Minneapolis. What followed was one of the largest drug raids in Minnesota history. 2 million fentanyl pills, $8,400,000 in cash, and a family network that had been poisoning American streets for years without anyone noticing. The FBI and DEA were done watching. The raid, the temperature read 14 degrees. Steam rose from sewer grates in thin white lines. South Minneapolis was silent, the kind of quiet that only comes in the early hours when most people are still asleep. At 4:42 in the morning on March 19th, 2025, that silence broke. 47 federal agents moved into position across 12 locations at the same time. Cars cut their engines a block away and rolled to a stop. Teams stacked up behind doors, weapons drawn, radios on. Each agent knew exactly where to go and exactly what to do. Months of planning came down to this moment. The operation had a name, Silent Blade. It was run jointly by the FBI and the Drug Enforcement Administration, with support from Homeland Security and local law enforcement. The targets were spread across South Minneapolis, from single-family homes to storage units to a small business front. Every location was connected. Every location was part of the same network. At 4:47, the first door was breached, then another, then 6 more, all within seconds of each other. Agents flooded inside each location with flashlights cutting through dark hallways. What they found in the next few hours would shape the largest drug trafficking case Minnesota had ever seen. The raid was not random. Every address, every target, every move had been planned based on months of surveillance and intelligence. Federal agents knew what was behind those doors before they opened them. But seeing it in person was different. The scale of what this family had built shocked even the most experienced agents in the room. Silent Blade had begun, and nothing in Minneapolis would stay the same. The target, Abdul Rahman Noor Ali, was 44 years old. To the people who knew him, he was a trusted figure. He organized community events in the Somali neighborhood. He helped families find housing. He spoke at local meetings and was known as someone who cared about his people. Neighbors respected him. Leaders in the community called on him when they needed someone reliable. He had built that reputation over years, carefully and deliberately. Federal investigators saw a very different person. Over 22 months, Abdul had moved $6,300,000 in cash that could not be traced to any legal job or business. He had no recorded income that came close to that amount. No visible business dealings, no real estate investments that made sense. The money appeared and disappeared through accounts and transactions that were carefully designed to avoid detection. When federal accountants first flagged the numbers, the gap between what Abdul reported and what he actually moved was so large it could not be explained away. Behind the public image of a community elder sat a man who, according to federal prosecutors, ran one of the most organized drug operations in the upper Midwest. He did not work alone. His family worked alongside him, each member playing a specific role in the network. The operation had been running for years, and for most of that time, no one in law enforcement had any idea it existed. Abdul had built something that looked like a tight family unit on the outside. He used trust, loyalty, and close ties to keep everyone inside the network quiet. Federal agents would soon learn just how deep that operation went and how far it reached beyond Minneapolis. How it all started. The case did not begin with a tip or a large-scale investigation. It started with a broken taillight. On January 18th, 2025, a Minneapolis police officer pulled over a vehicle during a routine traffic stop. The driver was Mohammed Farhan I. The stop was simple. A taillight was out. Officers asked for registration and license. Standard procedure. Nothing about the moment suggested what was about to happen next. What happened next changed everything. During the stop, officers detected a strong smell coming from the trunk. With consent, they opened it. Inside, they found a large quantity of fentanyl powder. Not pills, raw powder. The kind used to manufacture counterfeit drugs on a large scale. The amount recovered was enough to flag the case immediately and send it up the chain. Local officers did not handle it alone. Within hours, the case was referred to a federal task force. The FBI and DEA took over. Fentanyl powder at that volume pointed to something much larger than a single driver carrying drugs. It pointed to a supply operation, one with access to raw materials and the ability to produce finished pills in large numbers. Mohammed Farhan I was arrested on the spot. He did not talk. He did not give a name beyond his own. He sat in silence through the booking process and said nothing to the officers who questioned him. But federal agents knew he was not the top of the chain. He was a courier. Someone had loaded that powder into his trunk. Someone had a reason to move it. Finding that someone became the focus of everything that followed. That broken taillight had opened a door that federal investigators spent the next 8 weeks walking through. The surveillance phase. 8 weeks. That was how long federal agents watched before they moved. From late January through mid-March, teams from the FBI and DEA ran around-the-clock surveillance on Abdul Rahman Noor Ali and the people connected to him. They watched from unmarked cars parked on side streets. They used cameras mounted in discrete locations. They tracked phone signals and financial transactions in real time. Every move Abdul made was logged. Every person who visited his home was photographed and identified. What they observed was a family operating like a well-run business. Abdul held late-night meetings at his home, always after dark, always with the curtains drawn. People came and went at odd hours. Some stayed for minutes, others stayed for hours. Each visit followed a pattern that agents documented carefully. Abdul's brother, Isef, drove a white van across the city multiple times a week. The routes never changed randomly. They followed set paths, stopping at specific locations for brief periods before moving on. Agents followed the van on dozens of trips, noting every stop, every drop-off, every pickup. On several occasions, agents watched Isef carry bags from the van into buildings and leave without them minutes later. Their cousin Hodan lived in a way that did not match any income on record. New cars, expensive clothes, a lifestyle that cost far more than anything she could have earned legally. No job, no business, no explanation for where the money came from. Agents tracked her spending and found purchases that totaled hundreds of thousands of dollars over just a few months. Each piece alone might have raised questions. Together, they painted a clear picture. This was not a loose group of people acting on their own. This was a coordinated family operation with roles, schedules, and a chain of command. Abdul was at the top. Everyone else moved when he told them to move. By mid-March, agents had enough to act. The next step was to find out exactly what they were moving and where it was being stored. The financial web. Money does not move on its own. Behind every drug operation of this size, there is a system built to hide where the money goes. Abdul's network had one of the most carefully built systems investigators had seen at this level. Federal accountants traced cash moving through a web of shell companies. These were businesses, registered on paper with names that sounded legitimate. They had addresses, some had websites, but none of them did any real work. They existed for one purpose: to receive money and move it somewhere else without drawing attention. Transactions were kept under $10,000 each. That number matters. Federal law requires banks to file reports on any cash deposit or withdrawal of $10,000 or more. By staying just below that line, the network avoided automatic flags. Agents found hundreds of transactions structured this way, each one carefully timed to stay under the radar. The money did not stay in the United States for long. Wire transfers moved funds out of the country to accounts in Dubai, Nairobi, Istanbul, and Toronto. Each city added another layer between the source of the money and its final resting place. Tracing those transfers required cooperation from foreign governments and took weeks of work by Treasury Department analysts. Over the course of the investigation, federal accountants identified $30 million in total transactions moving through the network. The money came in as drug profits. It left as clean funds routed through legitimate-looking accounts overseas. The system was built to be hard to follow. It took months of work by some of the best financial investigators in the country to map it out. The money trail did not just show how much the network made, it showed how far the operation reached and how serious the people running it were about protecting themselves from detection. The warehouse discovery. Not all of the surveillance happened on the streets. Some of it happened underground, in places the network used to store and build what they were selling. Federal agents identified a facility in Burnsville, a suburb south of Minneapolis. On the outside, it looked like a standard warehouse, the kind used for storage by small businesses. Nothing about it stood out. The building sat in an area where warehouses like it were common, and no one paid much attention to what went in or out. Inside told a completely different story. When agents entered the Burnsville facility during the raid, they found 500 kilograms of raw fentanyl powder. That is over 1,100 pounds of one of the most deadly substances on Earth. Stored in sealed containers, stacked on shelving, organized and labeled. Next to the powder sat rows of pill presses, industrial machines designed to turn powder into finished pills at high speed. The pills produced at this location were built to look exactly like real medicine. Some were shaped and colored to match oxycodone. Others copied the look of Percocet and Adderall. To someone buying them, they would appear to be legitimate prescription drugs. They were not. Every pill contained fentanyl, and many contained 3 to 5 times the amount needed to kill a person. Agents also recovered 600,000 finished pills at the facility, ready for distribution. At the production rate the equipment was capable of, this single warehouse could have produced 2 million pills or more before anyone noticed. The operation was not designed to sell drugs in small amounts. It was designed to flood markets. The Burnsville warehouse was the heart of the network's manufacturing operation. Everything else, the money, the couriers, the cover stories, existed to support what was being built inside this building. The raids execute. When Silent Blade moved, it moved fast. Breaches happened at 6 homes, 2 businesses, and 3 storage units across the Minneapolis area, all within minutes of each other. Each team had a specific target and a specific job. Communication between teams ran through encrypted channels, monitored from a federal command center. Every breach was timed to prevent anyone in the network from warning others. The first homes hit were residences connected directly to Abdul. Officers entered with weapons drawn and lights blazing. People inside were ordered to the ground. Some surrendered without resistance. Others took longer. Every person at every location was detained and held for questioning. At Abdul's own home, agents found something that had not shown up on any exterior scan. A door behind a bookcase in the basement led to a hidden room. The room was small but packed with evidence. Ledgers, notebooks, phones, cash, documents going back years, all kept in careful order. Abdul had been recording the network's operations by hand, entry after entry, date after date. The records spanned 7 years of activity. Those ledgers became one of the most important pieces of evidence in the entire case. They showed who was involved, what was moved, when it happened, and how much money changed hands. Every name, every transaction, written down in Abdul's own handwriting. 22 people were arrested across the raids. Abdul Rahman Noor Ali was among the first to be taken into custody. He said nothing as agents led him out of his home in handcuffs. His face gave away nothing. The network he had spent years building was coming apart in real time, and every person in it was being pulled out one by one. The evidence. When the dust settled and every location had been searched, federal agents began cataloging what they had found. The list was long. 500 kilograms of fentanyl powder, $8,400,000 in cash, recovered from homes, businesses, and storage units across the city. 14 firearms, including several that had been reported stolen from other owners. 600,000 counterfeit pills, pressed and ready for sale. 2 million pills worth of production capacity based on the equipment and raw materials seized. But the most damaging evidence was on paper.
A federal investigation spanning more than a year uncovers weapons, drugs, and money and leads to 19 people being charged. One of the biggest drug ring takedowns.
The ledgers recovered from Abdul's hidden basement room documented $30 million in transactions over 7 years. Names, dates, amounts, locations, all of it written down. Federal prosecutors called it one of the most complete records of a drug trafficking operation they had ever recovered from a raid. The detail was remarkable. Abdul had kept track of everything, as if he believed no one would ever find it. Among the documents, agents found something else: a list of names, officials, law enforcement contacts, and others who had received payments. The amounts were listed next to each name. Some payments reached into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Federal investigators opened new lines of inquiry based on those names, and several individuals on the list were placed under immediate review. The full scope of that list had not yet been made public at the time of the raids. The total value of everything seized, drugs, cash, weapons, and other assets, exceeded $40 million. But for federal prosecutors, the real weight of the evidence was in what it proved. It proved that this network had been operating for years, right in the middle of one of America's largest cities, and that it had done so with help from people who were supposed to prevent exactly this kind of activity. The evidence told the full story. Now investigators turn their attention to the human cost. The human cost. Numbers tell part of the story. The faces behind those numbers tell the rest. In Hennepin County, which includes Minneapolis, 173 people died from fentanyl overdoses in the 18 months leading up to the raid. Some were teenagers. Some were middle-aged adults who had never used drugs before. Many had no idea what they were taking. They bought pills that looked like medicine prescribed by doctors. Those pills killed them. Federal prosecutors presented individual cases during later proceedings. A 23-year-old college student who bought what he thought was a single Percocet pill after a minor injury. He was found dead the next morning. A 31-year-old mother of 2 who took 1 pill for back pain after a long shift at work. She never woke up. A 17-year-old who got a single pill from a friend at a party. The pill contained 4 times the amount of fentanyl needed to stop a human heart. The damage extended beyond the people who died. The Somali refugee community in Minneapolis took a hard hit. Families who had come to America seeking safety found themselves living in a neighborhood flooded with deadly drugs. Young people in the community were recruited to sell. Others became victims. Trust in the community was shattered by the revelation that one of its own respected leaders had been at the center of the operation. Abdul Rahman Noor Ali had presented himself as someone who protected his community. The evidence showed he had poisoned it. The people who died from the pills his network produced were not strangers to him. They were neighbors. They were people who lived blocks away from where he held community meetings. The human cost of Silent Blade could not be measured in dollars or pounds of drugs. It was measured in lives ended and families broken apart forever. The larger network. Abdul's operation did not exist in isolation. Federal investigators found connections that stretched far beyond Minneapolis and far beyond one family. Intelligence gathered during the raids and the months of surveillance before them revealed links to two of the world's largest drug cartels, Mexico's Sinaloa cartel and the Jalisco New Generation cartel, known as CJNG. Both organizations had been expanding their reach into the upper Midwest for years. They needed local networks to handle distribution on the ground, and they found willing partners. Abdul's network received raw fentanyl powder through supply chains controlled by both cartels. The price of entry was loyalty and silence. The Burnsville warehouse was not the only facility tied to this operation. Distribution records recovered during the raids showed drugs moving across 5 states, from Minnesota down through Iowa, Wisconsin, Illinois, and into Indiana. Each state had its own set of contacts, drop-off points, and buyers. The network was built to move product at scale, and it had been doing so without interruption for years. Cross-border smuggling from Canada also played a role. Some of the raw materials used to produce pills entered the United States through northern border crossings, where enforcement was thinner and inspection was less frequent. Agents found records of shipments coming across the border at points in Montana and North Dakota, carried by individuals who faced little scrutiny. Federal agents shared intelligence with Canadian authorities after the raids, and joint investigations were opened into those crossing points. The most unsettling finding came from federal analysts reviewing the broader landscape of drug trafficking in the region. Based on the evidence recovered and the intelligence gathered, investigators estimated that at least 6 other networks similar to Abdul's were still active across the Midwest. Silent Blade had shut down one operation, but the problem was far larger than one family in one city. The arrests in Minneapolis sent a message, but federal agents knew the work was far from finished. The aftermath and trial. 22 people faced federal charges after the raids. Abdul Rahman Noor Ali was charged with conspiracy to distribute a controlled substance, money laundering, and weapons possession. Every person arrested was denied bail. Federal prosecutors argued that each defendant posed a serious flight risk and a danger to the public. Judges agreed. The trial is set for October 2025. It will be the largest drug trafficking case in the history of the state of Minnesota. Federal prosecutors plan to present the full scope of evidence recovered during Silent Blade, including the ledgers, the financial records, the phone communications, and testimony from cooperating witnesses within the network. Lawmakers at both the state and federal level called for action in the weeks following the raids. Some pushed for increased funding for border security and drug enforcement. Others focused on the corrupt officials identified in the ledgers, calling for a full review of every federal employee connected to the network. Community leaders in Minneapolis called for better support for Somali families caught in the middle, many of whom had no connection to the criminal operation, but lived with the consequences every day.
The first scheme was centered on supposedly feeding hungry children in the Somali community.
The case exposed how a drug network could hide inside a trusted community structure, use family bonds as cover, and operate for years without detection. It raised hard questions about how many networks like it were still running, and what would be required to find them. Abdul Rahman Noor Ali sat in a federal holding cell awaiting trial. The man who once organized community events and helped families find homes would now answer for what he had built. The evidence against him was overwhelming. The ledgers he kept himself made sure of that. The trial in October would determine how long he and the others would pay for what they had done. But the damage they caused, the lives lost, the trust destroyed, that could never be undone. 2 million fentanyl pills, $8 million in cash, 173 deaths in 18 months. The FBI and DEA dismantled one of the deadliest drug networks in Midwest history. But agents say more networks remain active. Subscribe now to follow every update as this case moves toward trial.